So how deep is the connection between consciousness and technology, considering the fact that all technologies were invented by consciousness in order to aid it in carrying out its day-to-day functions? But if consciousness, which does not rest, because the mind works even when we go to sleep, and everything we see is an invention of the mind. Actually, there are two means in which we perceive reality. The first is when we perceive nature. And in that case, we are perceiving high vibrational frequency materialism. In other words, nature is alive, and therefore it responds to nature as well as consciousness positively or perfect than anything else. In other words, nature on its own benefits the minds because it gives us a sense of peace, a sense of clarity, and it has a healing effect on our bodies. But technology is the exact opposite, because technology, more like anything that's man-made, has a negative aura due to the fact that it comes from an imperfect being and is detached from nature, meaning that it can no longer vibrate at the same frequency as everything else that's alive. And so if we're also to understand the fact that human beings are a deterioration of consciousness, and that we have created technologies in order to aid this deterioration, the same manner we use alcohol on a daily basis to help our consciousness escape the trappings of this boring singular reality. But the average person who uses alcohol hardly knows the main reason as to why alcohol is one of the most lucrative businesses there is, together with the pharmaceutical industry as well as drugs. The truth of the matter is that we human beings naturally exist in multiple dimensions, and the mind can never be able to deal with boredom. And so we have created these dependencies out of a natural need to escape this physical reality. And so in the case of technologies, it aids us with abilities to watch movies, play video games, as well as give us access into information. But given that this information is coming from imperfect beings, and we do not have high moral standards concerning our use of these technologies, this means that in the long run, technology will only have a detrimental effect on society. But let's talk about consciousness, which happens to be the mother of all and the founding element, or the principal entity in all of existence. Now, concerning consciousness, we know that the mind has no limits, meaning that if we were to combine our intelligences, ensuring that no one becomes wasted due to the fact that they didn't have money for education, that every soul being born contributes intellectually and otherwise to the development of the human race, would finally be in a position whereby we see the need to relegate schools in order to harvest the best that this mind can provide us with. What this will do, it will prevent us with an opportunity to harvest the intelligence that is raw from our kids, because children are born with a sense of self, a strong sense of self, due to something called ancestral memory. This ancestral memory due to the fact that every experience is gathered by our senses and collected by our brains and stored in our genes, meaning that nothing that happens in nature gets to be wasted. Everything is converted into a form of knowledge or memory, and this memory is thus converted into a practical, usable knowledge. And so with consciousness, we would finally have the ability to ignite the 10 dormant DNA strands, which would give us new activities as well as powers and access into various dimensions. And the main reason why we are locked into this one dimension is because nature vibrates at the same frequency as our minds. This is why if I'm stepping on the ground will always be there for my feet to land on, because that ground is a reflection of my mind in the same manner as the rest of my body. And so because all of it is a reflection of my mind, which vibrates at the same speed or frequency, it will be synchronized in order to give me a singular reality. But given that I were to open 2 more DNA strands, it would mean that the same capacity that I have to perceive this world will be divided into 2 until I can perceive another world simultaneously with this one. But we have physical senses which we use to perceive this physical world, meaning that you don't have to teach a child how to eat, how to walk or talk, because the child is born with a sense of speech due to the fact that a child is carried by a mother's stomach, which has a diaphragm, and this diaphragm vibrates, and in this vibration it sends signals, language signals to the child, which thus programs the child to have a familiarity with her mother's language. Hence it's called the mother tongue. But in the case of senses, all of them are designed to help us perceive this physical reality. But suppose we were to open our DNA strands, 10 to many DNA strands. This would also activate our 7 chakras. And these chakras are our means of communicating with other dimensions apart from this one. Furthermore, every chakra is connected to one of the 7 different colors which make up the light spectrum. This means that we would have the abilities to create light out of the blue, meaning that we will no longer need bulbs, because everywhere we are, we'll be able to see because of the auras of our own chakras. But for us to perceive these auras or to ignite them, we need to ignite our further DNA strands. And for that to happen, we need to detach ourselves from technology so that we can invest on our minds rather than pacifying them by using technologies instead. And the reason why we're using technologies so obsessively is also due to the fact that Westerners who design technologies lack the pineal gland, which is the ultimate doorway of intelligence, which governs the rest of the body as well as the rest of the chakras. And so because Westerners could not escape this physical matrix, they have to develop means to help them thrive in this physical world. Their biggest threat being us evolving consciously until we can escape this matrix. And so they've designed these governments as well as means for us to be locked into this world. Because today we are so fascinated with this technology that we fail to understand that it's the mind which invented them. And that we can invest in this mind to create further possibilities which we cannot fathom at this current moment. So with this being said, technology is a fraction and externalized version of consciousness, and yet consciousness on its own has no limits and could help us achieve the impossible as well as escape all what we consider a problem in this world.